The deep state is a nebulous term, most commonly used to describe the clandestine actions of shady and often unelected members of government and intelligence, sometimes decided in a discreet, smoke-filled room. As recently as the early days of the Trump administration, there was still some doubt in the public zeitgeist that the deep state actually existed. As I speak, Wikipedia still classifies the term deep state as a conspiracy theory. But is that really true? Is there really a dark, malignant corner of the government who secretly is pulling the strings and influencing politics behind the scenes, regardless of the boundaries of the Constitution or democracy? That's what we're going to try and find out today. Welcome to Deep State Lore Episode 1. Today's episode will be discussing the Finders. On February 4th, 1987, a concerned citizen in Tallahassee called 911 to report seeing 6 children in a park, who they described as being poorly dressed, bruised, dirty, and behaving like wild animals. They also said that the kids were chaperoned by 2 extremely well-dressed men driving a 1979 Dodge van with Virginia plates. The police responded to the call, and the kids were taken into protective custody. The kids didn't know what TVs, phones, staplers, or toilets were, or what they were used for. They said that they weren't allowed to live indoors, and that they were only given food as a reward. In the back of the van, there was a mattress that was being used as a bed, and it appeared as if all 8 people were living out of the van. As the police questioned the men, they stated they were the children's teachers, and were taking them to Mexico to establish a school for gifted children. The men were evasive with their answers, and the police struggled to even identify them. But once their identities had been determined, they also discovered a Washington, D.C. address connected to them. The Tallahassee Police Department suspected child pornography, and so they contacted the U.S. Customs Service, which has a child pornography and protection unit. At this point, the U.S. Customs Service and the Washington Metropolitan Police Department started working together, and a detective from the MPD indicated that the incident in Tallahassee was probably related to a case that he had been working on in D.C. It involved a cult called the Finders, and the detective said that they ran various businesses out of a warehouse in D.C. and housed children at a second warehouse, and that the arrests in Tallahassee would give them the cause they needed to search the buildings. According to the U.S. Customs report, the Metropolitan Police Department had already been dealing with the Finders, and, quote, the information was specific in describing blood rituals and sexual orgies involving children, and an as-of-yet unsolved murder in which the Finders may be involved. On February 6th, they conducted the search warrant and found some strange stuff. They found jars of feces, urine, and also a room equipped with several computers, printers, and a cache of documents. There was also a TV in one of the warehouses that had chairs surrounding it and appeared to be used for educating children with homemade movies produced by the Finders themselves. They found children's clothing along with quite a few packages of diapers. This is according to the U.S. Customs report. Cursory examination of the documents revealed detailed instruction for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. The instructions included the impregnation of female members of the Finders, purchasing children, trading, and kidnapping. There were telex messages using MCI account numbers between a computer terminal believed to be located in the same room and others located across the country and in foreign locations. One such telex specifically ordered the purchase of 2 children in Hong Kong to be arranged through a contact in the Chinese embassy. The investigators also found documents that discussed bank secrecy, high-tech transfers, terrorism, and explosives. To their astonishment, they even found a detailed summary of the events surrounding the arrest in Tallahassee the previous night and instructions that were broadcast via a computer network. The instructions advised the participants to move the children through different police jurisdictions and how to avoid police attention. The U.S. Customs agent and MPD officers also found a large collection of photographs. A number of the photos were of nude children, and one appeared to be a child on display, in a way that accented the child's genitals. An MPD officer then presented Martinez with a photo album. It contained photos of adults and children dressed in white sheets slaughtering 2 goats. The photos portrayed the slaughter, disembowelment, skinning, and dismemberment of the goats by the children. The photos showed the removal of the male goat's testes and the removal of baby goats from the female goat's womb, and the presentation of a goat's head to one of the children. Also in this U.S. Customs report, the agent said, not observed by me, but related by an MPD officer, were intelligence files on private families not related to the finders. The process undertaken appears to have been a systematic response to local newspaper advertisements for babysitters, tutors, etc. A member of the finders would respond and gather as much information as possible about the habits, identity, occupation, etc. of the family. Here's another excerpt from the report. Further investigation of the premises disclosed numerous files relating to the activities of the organization in different parts of the world. Locations I observed were as follows: London, Germany, the Bahamas, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Africa, Costa Rica, and Europe. There was also a file identified as Palestinian. Other files were identified by a member name or project name. The projects appeared to be operated for commercial purposes under front names for the finders. There was one file entitled Pentagon Break-In, and others referring to members operating in foreign countries. A month after the search warrant had been executed, the U.S. Customs agent set up a meeting with the MPD detective, and when he arrived at MPD headquarters, he found out that the detective was unavailable, and he was only able to speak to a third party who was willing to discuss the finders only on a strictly off-the-record basis. According to the U.S. Customs report, the individual further advised me of circumstances which indicated that the investigation into the activity of the finders had become a CIA internal matter. The MPD report has been classified secret and was not available for review. I was advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation several weeks prior, and that the FBI Foreign Counterintelligence Division had directed the MPD to not advise the FBI Washington field office of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available, and no further action will be taken. And indeed, earlier in the month, on February 10th, the Washington Police Department held a news conference, and at it, Police Chief Maurice Turner vehemently denied that the finders were involved in performing satanic rituals or even child abuse. He simply said they were a communal group and that nothing fishy was going on. 2 days later, after that press conference, the FBI said that their investigation was winding down too because they hadn't uncovered any evidence of federal violations. The 2 adult finders taken into custody in Tallahassee had their felony child abuse charges reduced to misdemeanors, and 6 weeks later, the abuse charges were dropped altogether. And the worst part of this whole story is that the children were eventually returned to the finders. And this is how the story ends. It was a cover-up of an international pedophile network in real time. Now you might be asking yourself, why would the CIA step in and kill this investigation? That's a very dangerous question because it leads to uncomfortable conclusions. Since then, there's been a series of revelations. The first came in 1993 when the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the alleged interference of the CIA. This came about from public pressure as well as pressure from members of Congress. Florida Representative Tom Lewis said, "Could our own government have something to do with this finders organization and have turned their backs on these children?" That's what the evidence points to. I can tell you that we got a lot of people scrambling, and that wouldn't be happening if there was nothing here. But of course, as with all mafia investigations of the mafia, or in this case, the Department of Justice, found no evidence of CIA interference and no criminal activity of any kind from the finders. And that is the official and legal end to this story. The second revelation, however, came from the FBI in 2019, just a couple months after Epstein died. The FBI released hundreds of documents related to their investigation of the Finders. So here's what we know about the Finders. The Finders was started by Miriam Petty, who was a retired U.S. Air Force Master Sergeant. The group's philosophy and style of operation was a mixture between Bhagwan Rajneesh and Charles Manson's The Family. According to Petty, the group's roots stretch back to a pre-World War II Washington, D.C. open house run by Petty when he was an Army sergeant. There, he claims to have become a full-time student of human nature. I rented 2 apartments about 50 years ago, he testified at the court proceedings, and opened them up for anyone that wanted to come in. And the idea in my head was that they were going to teach me something about power, money, or sex. Petty's wife, Isabel, was confirmed by the FBI file drop in 2019 to have been a staff stenographer for the CIA for over 20 years. And her passport showed trips to Moscow, North Korea, and North Vietnam in the height of the Cold War. His son worked for Air America, an airline recognized as a CIA front that was involved in Iran-Contra and was later renamed Southern Air Transport and was associated with Lex Wessner and Jeffrey Epstein. That's a lot of CIA connections. Most people don't have that many. We've since learned the identity of that third party that the U.S. Customs agent talked to that was previously anonymous. His name was Sergeant Stitcher, and he said that it was a CIA front gone bad. Effectively, what happened is that the group got sloppy and was found out by a freak incident that they didn't expect to happen. And when the public started sniffing around, intelligence came in and flexed their muscles and shut it down. No one in the Finders faced any consequences. Their operations were never dismantled, and those poor kids were sent back to the group so that they could continue to do God only knows what with them. It is truly one of the most bizarre cases I have ever come across, and it's yet another example of corruption in the most high places of government. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this presentation and got a lot out of it. I'd really like to get to 1,000 subs, and I've been stalled for a little bit. So if you watched this video and enjoyed it or learned something you never knew before, then please consider subscribing or liking this video or leaving a comment. Let's get the algorithm going on this video and give it some reach. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all in the next video, which will be on UFOs. Peace.